Pilots know now that you can make reports all day long and nothing will be done about it, nothing will be investigated. They'll take your report and they lose it immediately. Military pilots have made reports many times. They've chased them. They have been sent out to chase it, to find out what they are. They come back with reports, and it's as far as it ever goes.
It happened on the night of November 17th, 1986, 35,000 feet over Alaska. A pilot from Japan Airlines reported seeing a UFO 2 times bigger than an aircraft carrier, flying dangerously close to his plane. He alerted air traffic control. This is the actual tape of their conversation that night.
I want you to keep a good track on there, and if you can pick up a code, verify that you do not have any aircraft operating in that area.
That is firm. We do not have anybody up there right now. Can you give me the position of primary you're receiving?
The pilot tracked the enormous UFO for 10 minutes, and then it vanished into the night stars. Shaken, the pilot completed his scheduled flight, only to learn that he was grounded. He is not alone. Air traffic personnel are pressured into silence as well. This controller, who has tracked UFOs on radar, feels strongly that authorities such as the FAA do more than just discourage the filing of UFO sighting reports. Only on the condition that his identity not be revealed did he agree to talk to us.
Do you think there's actually a system in place to discredit people who might come forward?
Yes. There was one in Fairbanks that the controller saw something up to the north, and he reported it, and they made him look like an idiot. And he said, "Hey, forget it. I'm dropping the paperwork. I must have been mistaken."
You know, some people who see this might think you're seeing things. What would you say to that?
I know what I saw, and if they would choose to say that it was something different, they weren't there.
Dr. Richard Haynes, a retired NASA scientist who documents these sightings, helps pilots fight back. He defended the Japan Airlines pilot.
Captain Tarucci followed the book. He did everything by the book. He reported the phenomenon, which were multiple objects, by the way, not just one. He kept the airplane in control at all times. He had multiple eyewitnesses in the cockpit, and even at that, he lost his flying status. The chief medical officer for Japan Airlines told me Captain Tarucci was asked to stop his flying duties because the airline did not want to have pilots flying their airplanes who were seeing visual illusions.
Even the FAA did not dispute Captain Tarucci's claims because air traffic control had confirmed the UFO on radar.
Defender 1628 at register. I'm picking up a hit on the radar, approximately 5 miles in trail, your 6 o'clock position. Do you concur?
They were very rational at the time when they landed at the airport. There was no appearance of any kind of drug or alcohol abuse or anything like that. They're very sincere about their situation and their descriptions, and basically we have no reason to doubt them with regard to what it is they say they saw.
But it was Dr. Haynes' extensive database of similar cases that helped Tarucci get his job back.
I went to bat for him, and I persuaded them, I think, that Captain Tarucci is not all that unusual because of all these other cases that I have. Second, that the objects he saw are not all that unusual, as bizarre as they seem to be to most people. And third, he's a good pilot.
Aviation pioneer Dick Russell's distinguished career includes 26 years as an air safety chairman and 5 years as spokesman for the Airline Pilots Association. He's flown virtually every passenger plane made since the DC-3. In the fall of 1956, Dick Russell was flying as a co-pilot when his flight captain pointed out the window.
And I looked up and I saw an object which was saucer in shape. It was approximately 50 or 60 feet in diameter. I was stunned, and I said, "What is that?" And about that time, it zoomed across in front of my windscreen and stopped, and then flew off at about a 45-degree angle, very high speed. I said, "What in the world was that?" He said, "Well, now you've seen one." But he says, "You can't tell anybody because they think you're nuts."
Ridicule and humiliation have been a constant for pilots ever since they first began to report UFO sightings during the Second World War. By the 1950s, although sightings were becoming more common, filing reports became a rarity.
The phone will ring one night, and here's a senior captain of an airline who says, gee, I've got to tell somebody my story. And then when I assure him it'll be confidential, which it always is if he wants, this wonderful story comes rolling out.
With well over 2,000 cases in his computer database, Haynes has found a remarkable consistency in the descriptions of these objects.
I have wonderful cases of the airplane is like here, and the object will be off the left wing, and then it'll hop over to the right wing. One very interesting case I investigated involving a commercial transport flying across the country at night. The captain told me that he was on autopilot flying at cruise altitude and cruise speed when all of a sudden the airplane began to fly by itself to deviate off, I believe, to the left-hand side.
The alarmed pilot noticed that all three of his compasses were pointing to different headings. Then he saw a bright object hovering by his left wing. He observed it for several minutes before it darted off in a flash.
Air traffic control in Boston said, United 94, where are you going? And so I said, well, when we figure this out, I'll let you know. Whatever it was, it did cause a disruption in the magnetic field around the aircraft to the point where it did pull the aircraft off course.
The airplane is the focus of attention of the phenomenon for some strange reason, not the other way around.
Later on, I mentioned it to my boss, and he gave me a ration about, well, bad things happen to people that have sightings like that.
In the early 1950s, Art Schaff was flying 7 passengers, including 2 officers, from Eglin Air Force Base in Florida to Louisville, Kentucky, when he had a spectacular sighting. The next day, Schaff was thoroughly debriefed.
There was a full colonel who was chief of intelligence, and he's the one that called me in. I found out later that everybody was called in that was on that flight, and everybody apparently saw the same thing. Back in those days, when more than one person had a sighting like this, they used mass hallucination as a possible answer to the whole thing.
Schaff had been the first to notice the strange orange light hovering alongside the plane. He quickly pointed it out to his co-pilot.
Out of nowhere, it's alongside of us. These 3 huge glowing balls in a triangle. And it stayed right with us as we pressed on. And the colonel said, Art, turn into it. And I said, forget it. And he kept it up. So I very gingerly dropped my left wing into this whatever it was, and it just took off like a streak.
Dr. Haynes showed us case after case of other pilot sightings, all with minute detail about the encounters.
And he says, Dr. Haynes, you're never going to believe what just happened to me over Lake Michigan. And I said, Phil, what do you think you saw? He said, there's no doubt in my mind that's a vehicle from outer space. Nothing could do what it did. It was as big as a football field, he said. 50,000 people could be on that thing, it was so big. And he showed me, moment by moment, as he's sitting in this position at first, where the object seems to be imaged on the windshield throughout the entire sighting. It disappeared behind the post here, it reappeared, it's a real object, it seemed to be under intelligent control, it had structure to it. They felt a slight shock wave at the nearest point when the object was doing its turn and then going away. By the way, he did not report this case to the authorities. He kept this to himself.
This wasn't an aircraft. You know, I've been around too many of them. Optical illusion, 7 people saw it.
You place your trust and your life in the hands of a pilot every time you climb on an airplane. But there have been too many sightings by people that, well, have some credibility to put it off forever.